Welcome to Audiation in the Wild with your hosts, Beau Tellifer, Ron Malanga, and Eric Rasmussen. Season 5, Episode 3, Why Counting Rhythms is Not Preferred. Well, the boys are back in town. The band is back together. Ron's here, along with Beau. Hi, Ron. Hi, Beau.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Hello, hello.
So I don't know, Beau, if you want to set this up. Today we're talking about the rhythm. That's why we got Ron, the Rhythm Meister.
The Rhythm
Meister.
The Rhythm.
Ron,
Just one of them.
Rhythm Malanga Meister. And he's going to eliminate, ameliorate, enlighten us on why rhythm should not be counted as a way to learn. Oh, you could set us up because
no pressure.
Instigated by one of your outrageous clickbaity videos that you put.
So I made a ton of YouTube videos. My goal was to make 60 videos in 6 weeks, and I made like 40 something. So I was playing around with thumbnails and titles, and it was good. It was fun. And I think a lot of it lines up with MLT, although I make no claim at all to be a traditionalist. I just like Gordon's ideas and concepts, and it's a great time. So one of the videos I labeled something along the lines of why counting rhythms doesn't teach rhythm, which is a little awkward verbally, but I think it translates what I was saying. I watched this video many times. I've rewatched it. It's, 15 or 20 minutes long. And for anyone who knows anything about MLT, it's pretty standard. I even quote passages out of learning sequences in music verbatim. And I feel like I'm quite tempered in my presentation where I say, if someone learns to audiate rhythms basically through oral, I'm not even opposed at some point for counting to be brought into the equation, but it's definitely not appropriate when people are first learning to audiate and learning to move their bodies and all of that. And I'm saying, yeah, maybe one day you learn how to count and that's all good. But maybe in the beginning, it's really not a helpful tool to accent. And my response, that video got a lot of views because it's a controversial topic. And so there's a flood of people liking it and agreeing it, and a lot of people not liking it, not agreeing it. Even the other morning, this is what I was going to tell you guys earlier off air. I got a comment, and this guy was like, "You obviously have no idea what you're talking about." And then it just proceeds to get nastier and nastier. So the hate mail, rolled in, but it's a hot topic. And I think that's what you wanted to address, Ron, is like, why is it such a controversial thing to say, maybe we should learn to do the rhythm thing in a certain way, and then we'll add the concepts and stuff to it later.
So let's explain before we get into why it turned into the hot topic it is. What is the Gordon shorthand for why you don't teach counting? Ron.
You asking me?
Oh, I've got to do the Gordon shorthand for why we don't teach counting. Rhythm is kinesthetic. It's a kind of abstraction internally of our body moving through space externally. Oftentimes when we were so young, if you've got a high enough aptitude, oftentimes when you were so young, you sort of move through some phases that I don't necessarily know that they're perfectly sequential, but if you can move with any kind of coordination at all, you're sooner or later not moving in those angular, jabby, stabby ways that a baby's moving when their elbows are sort of firing off. And you start to get some level of what Gordon would have called flow, and I think he took that directly from Laban, but something continuous and flowing. That if you do that with enough of your body, you take up enough space while you're moving in a kind of flowing manner, sooner or later, you'll move so far that you'll feel your own body's imbalance. And to me, that one moment of feeling simply kinesthetically heavier because you're leaning so far over, maybe that leads to a real imbalance, and you plop over if you were seated or or stumble if you were standing. But as a kid learns to control that kinesthetic feeling of imbalance, that body weight shift, to me, that internalization is a beat. That to me is what a beat is. It's a remembered or actually felt moment of imbalance. And if you can flow steadily from one of those to another, now you've got tempo. So you're flowing from one moment of imbalance to another. And I would think Gordon kind of keeps building on this. Subdivide that flowing imbalance, and you've got meter. So you've got your microbeats when maybe the way a rapper might be freestyling, and one hand is kind of chopping the beat in half. You get duple, chopping it to thirds, you get triple, and that whole physical feeling of flowing imbalances, call those macrobeats, that are subdivided into microbeats, becomes the kind of network for sort of capturing rhythms, because now your brain has something to relate the patterns to and sort of glue them onto. And I think all of that is just felt long before there's anything that makes sense to count.
Yeah.
You don't have anything to count that you haven't physically felt yourself. So that'd be my, I don't know if that was a short version, but that'd be my
Pretty good.
take on it.
Well, I want to highlight what you just said there is that if you don't have the kinesthetic thing online, what are you counting?
Yeah.
So if I take someone to a farmyard and I say, let's count some goats, and no one's seen the goat, what are you going to be doing? You're just going to be walking around saying numbers, right? And that's really and I think Engelman would have agreed with this, and he actually talks about this in for everyone, the guy who invented direct instruction, or at least was the spearhead. But when you're teaching concepts or just things, skills, things that have to do with your senses and your body, sounds, kinesthetic movements, anything that's related to one of your senses, you can't add a conceptual label to it or a conceptual description unless the person can play with the actual sensory domain first. And so, rhythm being something that's kinesthetically primary, it this isn't the case for everyone, and you kind of alluded at this, but some people are not at the point where there is something they can count. They don't recognize the thing that can be counted. So it just logically doesn't make sense to try to force someone to count something that they can't concretely recognize. We even do this with kids. When kids first learn to count, we don't teach them abstract numbers. We say, count how many apples there are, count how many how many yellow beads are there? There's always a concrete thing when kids learn to count first that's related to their senses. Then we can abstract numbers later on. But I think music teachers, in their very, I think, earnest and well-meaning intention, they're already at the point where they can do that with the kinesthetic thing and the conceptual understanding, and they want to kind of jumpstart people into the theory and the concepts, right? And so but they don't realize they're bypassing something that needs to be in place
before you start
first.
adding that dimension to it. There's a couple things.
Yeah.
One is rhythm comes from the Greek rhythmos. This is something I learned maybe 40 years ago. Rhythmos, which came from the river. Like the river, the flow, the flow of a river. So rhythm itself is a literal, flow. It means.
I don't know how I had never heard that. That's sick.
So yeah, Greek.
And and so that's one thing. The other thing, we're talking about the net that we were imagining. The net isn't just the strings, it's the holes between the strings. How much of the hammock is the holes and how much of it is the string in square area?
Negative space.
Negative.
So
I don't know where you're going with that, Eric, but it was cool sounding.
The beats are the strings, but they don't do anything. It's all the space in between the strings that do everything.
Yeah.
I kind of view it as a kind of network to just be something to have a relationship now with for rhythms. Mm-hmm. But to me, that gets beyond counting. The kid that as Beau said, that has the earnest enthusiastic teacher that's counting things for the child who couldn't
Mm.
feel the beats on their own, counting those rhythms and or naming those rhythms and counting those beats for the kid. They think they're teaching rhythm to the young kid's mind, and the kid that's sitting still and really being earnest about paying attention to the teacher is busy leeching rhythm from their young body, you know.
Mm.
And it can be a real problem because I think later I think often the teachers are also starting with rhythms that are so simple that maybe the kid does get it, and it even looks like evidence of success that I think
Mm.
later on burns out fast once you try to get to something anything more sophisticated, a syncopation, something that hangs over a bar, a tie. It's just sometimes
Mm.
just long notes, and things start to break down very, very quickly because the kid didn't feel the underpinnings in the first place.
So it's just because that's the way their teacher taught them. So I'm going to pass down
Mm-hmm.
what happened to me. Uh, Isn't that the ultimate reason that
And
this is just why
Often is.
it's
yeah.
it's unconsidered. It's just not. You don't consider why we teach it the way we do.
There was a gentleman, which I totally agree, and there was a gentleman who, a music teacher, who commented somewhere on that video, and he said, "Look, you know what? I teach people to subdivide 16th notes. We do a lot of drills, we do a lot of patterns, accents, and it just works." And then we had a back and forth, and it was very polite. He was like, "You know what? Maybe you have some good points, but I prefer to do it with the counting. It just works." But I was kind of poking at him a little bit and saying, well, you know, it's kind of interesting. I bet what happens when you do this 16th note subdivision thing, there's a period where you're making them count it and it's awkward, but they do it so much, they just start imitating you. And you notice a shift in the quality of their performance. And maybe it takes a week. Maybe for some kids, it takes 3 months. Maybe for some people, it takes a year or two. But something happens where the clarity of their performance of the rhythms, there's a phase shift in it. And what I said to him in the comments, something along these lines, is that phase shift is actually what I'm looking for before I do any counting. So I'm actually not surprised that him subdividing the beat into 16th notes is helping these people. I think that often is something that people struggle with. And we see this with beginning piano method books. I'm going to pick on, but I'm not going to pick on any specific method or specific teacher. The obsession with the quarter note without any awareness, without any kinesthetic thing, but beyond that, without any division of the beat, it is bound to make people fail. And this is the incorrect use of the metronome. When people are told to use the metronome and they can't subdivide and they have no sense of meter, there's no point to using a metronome. When you have a sense of meter, a metronome can be a damn good time. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. You can put it on weird parts of the beat. You can interact with it. You have what Ron was saying. You have this internal network of relationships that now you can bring this little thing in to that network that's making these clicks. But if you don't have an internal network of beat relationships and divisions and kinesthetic mapping, metronome makes zero sense to use at that point. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to mention metronomes because I've gotten emails from parents where it's like, Timmy's doing his classical music exam, which I'm down for. I heard that he should be using a metronome and counting. And I'm not getting Timmy to count or use the metronome. So his mom's, I think well-meaning and kind of worried that something may be fishy with the way I'm approaching things. And there's something in the zeitgeist about counting and metronomes and
Numbers are trustworthy.
which are not. yeah. So
I think there is a psychological thing to just the trustworthiness of numbers. I'm repeating numbers, so they must be have just internal validity and consistency because 2 followed 3 followed 4. Or I said that backwards, but 3 followed 2 followed 1.
well, if you're counting down.
Well, we were counting down. There you go. But I mean, to take the flip side of that for what Beau said, I mean, there are kids that, the metronome's not going to harm them, do them any harm. They've already begun to refine things and they've got a decent sense of pulse on a piece. But like then there's those kids that they just speed up and slow down all the time. I was one of them. I remember my drum lessons. Ronald, you're slowing down. Ronald, you're speeding up. Dr. Ed Barrows as a little kid, I'd go to the lessons. He'd have one cigarette in his mouth and one cigarette burning in the
Yeah.
ashtray at the same time. It was just wild, and I didn't get black lung from Ed Barrow.
Oh,
But he got me to be a sophisticated enough player that I made the All-State and band in Florida. But initially, I was all over the map, and and I'm glad I was, I don't know, intuitive enough to notice what he would do with his body when I was speeding up and slowing down. And I knew there
hmm.
must have been something to it because he'd start talking about counting and everything else, but he'd also start physically moving. And so I started physically moving, and I would have been one of those kids who sped up and slowed down. And I realize now, looking backwards, that I really had a very limited sense of flow through space. And
Hmm.
sure, the result was that the ictus, that millisecond moment of where the beat belongs, kept getting shunted around, but I was rushing and dragging the space between those beats. And I think people that have a limited control over space because they haven't moved with enough flow will usually be the kind of kid who will do what I did when they're trying to play more sophisticated rhythms. Little drummer boy that I was, lacking control over space, my beats didn't remain consistent in placement, and so
Hmm.
the structure above it, the meter, and of course the patterns I was trying to put on top of them, was all getting kind of shifted about. And I'm really glad because even as much as I loved him as a teacher, he did not teach me to keep good time through what he was telling me. I learned to keep good time by noticing what he did with his body every time I messed up. And I just intuited that there must be some reason why that's when he started moving. So I started moving like him on my own time, and I got better.
You see this really interesting thing where I've taught a handful of people to play drums since I've
Mm,
been exposed to Gordon's work. And if we're just doing a simple beat on the drums, when people are audiating that well and they have the time, space, and the flow and the meter online, you can see their hand winding up for the snare way before it happens. So when people are clunky, you can see they're about to do the snare and they kind of engage their arm and then try to bang it on time. When they're audiating the meter properly and the rhythm properly, their hand winds up way before the beat
yeah,
is coming because they're audiating where it should be, and their arm almost expresses the flow that they're feeling and
yeah.
expresses the space. And to me, that's such an easy way to tell where someone is with something they're doing on the drums as an example. But guitar players do this too, and piano
Everybody.
players do this
Right.
too, and um, yeah, everyone's doing it. I think it's funny. I have a student right now who's working on like really interesting odd time signature music. Like I forget his last name, Tigran, a very interesting jazz musician. But he showed me this song, and he's like, "Where do you feel the meter here?" And it's one of these just kind of rolling, 7 7 7 5 7 7 5 5 5 kind of
Mm,
odd time signature songs. And I said, you know what you should do? Get a video of this guy playing and watch his body move while he's playing it. That's what you should be doing to figure this out, because I have no way of figuring it out. He's not putting accents anywhere in the sound. We could interpret this subjectively, but I think your best bang for your buck, just as a starting point, is watch the guy play it, because if he's moving on certain parts of the performance, we can be more certain that there are macro beats there than in other parts of the. And I'm not saying that's the answer to all the problems, but it brings the conversation back to this kinesthetic component. And I think that's, Ron, this is what you're getting at, where some teachers say count, but when you're in the room with them, their playing is so good and they're moving their body, maybe some of the kids or some of the students, they notice that. But there is a problem when nothing's being said about that, right? I think it's just more
mm.
direct to be like, just try to move your body with me. This you might get to where you want to go a little faster. Um, and I think that's the problem with counting, is the counting gets sold as this thing that's going to solve the problem, and it can't on
Yeah.
its
It
own solve the problem.
doesn't it inherently
Um,
lack feeling counting? I mean, you can add some weight, I suppose, right? 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E, or style or. Oh,
I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I think if you're totally locked onto just the space between the beats, so to speak, then sure it'll be kind of mechanical, a little less than
yeah.
groovy.
So you but
Can I give you
But
guys a fun example?
yeah, please.
In band class, I think I was in grade 10 or 11. Our teacher was teaching us how to count 6/8. And I, for whatever reason, it's one of these memories that's just glued in there. I remember sitting there with a tuba. One of my friends is playing a bass guitar on my left. I remember the band teacher drawing the two groups of three notes. So three notes beamed together. He had microbeats and 6/8 written out. I remember him explaining mathematically what it was. I also remember having no idea what the hell this guy was talking about. Zero idea. And you know what's crazy? At that time, I could play in triple meter very, very well. I knew many songs in triple meter. On my own, I probably went home that evening and played a ton of stuff with like divisions in triple meter. And yet I had no idea what he's talking about. And he was a great musician. I think in a lot of ways, a great music teacher. But I, at that point, was not ready to have someone try to conceptually explain what 6/8 was to me. It just nothing even happened in my brain. I basically just listened to the band and just played what I thought sounded proper.
I think I don't know. I think everyone's had some kind of experience. I would imagine that loves just the rhythmic vitality of music, where something spun their head off a little bit rhythmically. My example would be as a kid
Mm,
listening to Firebird by Stravinsky, and I
mhm.
thought it was all downbeats. I thought it was bang, 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 and to like later on discover that they were all upbeats, bum, 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 but I was like, oh wow, I had audited the whole tune upside down. So I thought all those
Mm.
little, if you know the tune, I thought all those little wonderful shrieks that Stravinsky inserts, bum beep boo bum bum beep. I would have assumed
Yeah.
those were on the afterbeats, and so
Mhm.
I had turned the whole song upside down in my audiation until I saw the
Oh,
notation. I mean, literally until I saw the
any
notation.
swing all through college that went fast.
Oh,
The
sure.
cymbal, you know, the hi hat. That was always morphing to one to me. Because it was
Yeah,
stronger
Mm, mm.
than all the other
yeah.
sounds.
Monk's Nefertiti did
And
that to me.
I had the hardest time, because I couldn't feel what wasn't already handed to me. Like,
Yeah,
right?
Mm.
It, it had to
yeah,
be
yeah.
explicit, and then I could.
Well, Ron, I wanna play devil's advocate here, because I had a similar experience. I printed out the score of the Rite of Spring,
Uh-huh.
and in the beginning, especially, I started conducting the score along with the notation while I was listening to it,
Mm,
and it flipped my perspective of some of the rhythms in the beginning
right.
of the piece, especially when it's just the bassoon in the psychotically high register. And so to play devil's advocate, I think when we have very nice and well intentioned teachers who are really hot on the counting, what they're trying to say is that the counting somehow can do that. And so in that example, when I conducted the Rite of Spring and you found the score to the Firebird, it showed you where the macro beats should be. It showed you where your body should be moving kinesthetically. But again, that's left out of the conversation with counting, is that the people that are pushing the counting too early are forgetting that the reason it's making you perceive things, air quote, correct or more helpfully, is that you have this internal network that says, okay, well, this is the meter and this is where I should feel the weight. And I mean, we all know that music teachers try to do all kinds of things like put accents on beat one and stuff like that, but
Mhm.
that doesn't serve as a surrogate for the weight of that spot. And I think in learning sequences, Gordon even says a lot of the air quote more natural ways or correct ways of phrasing in triple meter, you would actually play beat one softer and not put an accent there.
Yeah.
It just doesn't sound right. If you play a Bach piece in triple meter and you accent beat one, it sounds weird. It should actually be less than accented,
Yeah.
um, which is
Yeah.
hilarious.
Right, right.
um,
Yeah. Yeah,
so I don't
yeah.
know, like, what do we do with that? Because the counting clearly, once you have the chops, it can show you where the downbeat should be, and that's obviously the genius of the what's his name? I forget the four. Is it Force?
Laban.
No, not Laban,
Oh,
but the other guy that made the rhythm syllables. Force. I
oh,
forget his name.
Froseth.
Frosted.
James
Yeah.
Froseth.
Froseth. Yeah,
I
Oh,
thought it
is
was
it Fra?
Froseth.
I guess I've only ever seen it. I've only
Froseth.
ever seen it written. Yeah, forgive
Yeah,
us,
I thought
Doctor
fourth.
Process. Yeah, I've only ever seen it written, so I guess I wouldn't know if I'm getting it right or not.
So it makes sense to have have a word that denotes like that should feel heavy kinesthetically there. When we say the word do, that means boom, like an anvil is dropping or something like that. Um, but then I think a lot of teachers try to do that with the numbers. And I do think there are teachers that can do that better with numbers than other teachers. I think there
Mm-hmm.
are some teachers out there who do a better job of teaching with numbers. I'm not saying that anyone ever that's taught with numbers doesn't get the kinesthetic thing. But it is generally a circus.
Do we have any monkeys to add to this circus, such that you ask teachers, all right, you think you know this stuff? Go listen to this tune and find the pulse yourself. Kind of challenges.
Mhm.
I remember Tool's Schism breaking my brain at one point, and what is it, Pyramid Song by Radiohead? And where I think of those as floaters, not that kind of floater, but where the note groupings and the melody is displaced off the beat and kind of floats and kind of hovers above it.
Mhm.
Whether it's hemiola or ties or
Yeah.
subtle
Yeah.
ties over the bar, things like that. Not that those are violently difficult examples, but I know they certainly took me a second to lock into. Ornette
Mhm.
Coleman, lonely woman, lonely home. What's it called? Coleman.
Uh,
It's
yeah,
another floater to me. Just floats. The
Mm.
no,
time
it's
feels
not.
detached. I mean, you can lock onto the ride, like you just said, Eric. You can lock onto the ride if you know
Mm.
the
Yeah.
patterns, but it's not a straight swing ride either. But the melodies floats wonderfully detached. The melody line from the time feel.
Yeah, or if you
I don't
listen
know
to
what's
Daryl
out there that
Garner's
would mess with
right hand
teachers.
versus his left hand. His left hand is locked
Yeah,
solid, and his right hand is all over the place, and it's the most beautiful kind of press,
Mm.
push and pull around the beat.
yeah,
So like you can't count that. You just can't count.
yeah.
The way Miles Davis played. The bebop solos back in the day.
Billie
Billie
Holiday
Holiday's
singing
another
anything.
one. Um, not a little more up to date stuff. Dave Holland and his group did a tune
Mm.
called Not for Nuttin', Not for Nuttin',
Mm,
right? Nuttin'. And that
Mm.
tune is, it took, I, I played that literally, only the first part of that first tune, 5 hours in the first week I got it. And I never got beyond that because I wasn't going to allow myself to listen to till I got until I got it. And I couldn't get it. And I reverted to counting to try to make sense out of it. And like, okay, I got to
Mm.
try really hard. So now I got to count it somehow. It didn't help. it, it didn't help. This is 20 years ago. Like I've I reverted to my most basic instinct, which was like what I was taught. Not basic instinct like natural, but like I was
yeah,
trying to
Mm.
yeah.
browbeat
Well,
myself.
start.
I
Mm-hmm.
The
can't even reproduce it, I don't think, but it's really cool stuff. Uh, it's
I remember when I was teaching IB music in Dubai, and the set piece one year was Claude Debussy's La Mer, and the first movement of that is a wonderful, um, subtle thing. He's got the low bass line moving in its own sort of pattern, that the low bass, almost like the deep water, moving at its own flow, and then the mid range is moving at a slightly faster pace, and then above that something moving, and then the surface is kind of fluttering along, and nothing aligns up with what I was audiating as the beat when I first listened to the tune before I got the score to begin to study it again. And it was one of those things
Mm.
like, oh, that's so interesting and subtle what he did there. And I mean, there's not that many really interesting examples to me of subtle and brilliant rhythmic writing in classical very often, at least until you get
Mm.
past older stuff. But I mean, even like what Steve Reich, piano
mm-hmm.
phase, you've got two identical patterns that just drift out of sync with each other. So which one is
Mm.
the real beat? and multi-temporal, I guess Gordon would call it, because you're going to latch on to one or the other and just watch the other one sort of drift away, a la Errol Garner's right hand or something. But and then a chorus comes back in, and you might audiate, sudden latch onto it, and just drop the other one. I don't know, but of course I don't have the audiation to know what it would feel like to truly be able to keep mental control over both as they phase out of sync with each other. I would think
Well, it's kind of a funny topic. This came up with a student, the same guy I was telling you, who's working on interesting on time signature music, and I was tabling the idea with him that so he thinks that the band is audiating different meters. He thinks that within the band, the piano player's whatever for this section audiating like 7/7/5, and the drummer's audiating like a bigger like 5/4 over the whole thing. And I said, you know what? That probably is what's happening. I mean, that can totally happen. I'm less convinced that you can audiate 2 meters at the same time as a single conscious mind. I think you could very fluidly shift back and forth, but perceptually, I don't even know what that would mean to be able to actually audiate 2 meters at the same time. It would destroy the reference frame of what a meter even is logically. And some people don't seem happy with that because I think when we get very attached to counting and the way notation is displayed, you can be like, well, I can write 7/8 with a 5/4 under it, so why not? And you have to remind people sometimes, well, I'm not talking about the way it's written. I'm talking about the way you're perceiving it in terms of a conscious experience. And I don't think you can actually perceve both. I think you could get so fluid at flipping back and forth at any point in the 7/8 or 5/4.
One of my favorite pieces, tracks that I play for my kids is Bobby McFerrin Sisters. It starts out dum ticka ticka dum dum ticka ticka dum. It's got that rhythmic groove. And when Bobby comes in, it's da 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 da. Dum ticka ticka dum dum ticka ticka da 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 da. It's it's a ba 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 da ba. So the melody is da 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 da, but every once in a while he comes in with da 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 do da dee do da do da dee do da dee do da dee do da dee do da do dee da. Well, and that's over top of and I've been playing this tune forever, and every time he comes in with that da 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 da, I say, get ready, he's gonna do da ba doo ba doo ba. He's going to do beat a bada bada or whatever. He's going to do it. Ready? Listen. Dooba daba diba. And if I don't screw up, he does. And because it's kind of weird when it happens and when it doesn't. But it's da 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 da. And I get the kids to move with triple with me. And I say, oh, I forgot. It's still going down. And I'm saying, hey, that's like, I impose over top of that, like twinkle, 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 dum, ticka, ticka, that twinkle, twinkle, little star, dum, ticka, ticka, that goes with twinkle. And hey, that goes with Jack in the Box, still as a mouse. Da 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 da. What's that go like? And I have my spring song that has butter to bum bum bum. But I just have them feel it, and I have them say the rhythms with me while they're moving. The thing is, I'm really having trouble with is getting 3 and 4-year-olds to give me, when they can do patterns, they'll do rhythm patterns, but they won't. I like say it. I want them to say it while they're moving their body, and it's like almost like their body gets in the way of their ability to perform with their mouth. Like just say ba and move at the same time. They don't say ba. They won't say it. I don't.
Do you think
I
that's
don't know what's going on in their brains
or...
that they can't say ba at the same time they move their body on ba. It's a Phyllis Weichert thing that I'm trying to work on, is coordinating their body movement with their speech pattern, or vice. In this case, it's vice versa. You coordinate. They're able to say it. Now you want to put the body to it. But that's the Weichert kind of way of teaching, folk dance or whatever. You say it before you move to it. and then you say it and move to it together, and eventually you stop saying it and you move to it. And it's just like
Mhm.
a way of coordinating your body to your mouth. And your mouth is the most coordinated thing on your body, right? Your tongue is doing miraculous things, even by 2 years old. But
I would think that's then the breath itself is what's the uncoordinated aspect of it. You know, Gordon again, his his definition of coordination, you know, in preparatory ideation is about breath and movement becoming
Mhm.
united. And that inhalation, what we're not teaching the moment before they have to do the ba, which has to be
Mhm.
prepared for. And that inhalation to me is quite analogous to what Bo said about watching a young drummer that he might be teaching, and sort of seeing that fluidity on the uplift
yeah, yeah.
prior
Well,
I was just gonna say
to a
I'm
that.
downstroke.
conducting them.
I think those things are quite similar.
Well, I think it is the same thing. I would
Yeah.
be shocked if we somehow could take the drummers and split them into groups of who can wind up for the snare, kind of
Hmm.
with that proper kinesthetic movement. I bet you those are the same kids or people that can wind up for vocalizing the
Yeah.
pattern with their breath.
I,
I
I,
mean, to me,
I,
it just seems so clear. It's the same mechanism.
I'd place my money on that
Uh,
too.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Rhythm.
one thing I want to one thing I want to get in here at some point in this conversation is that I think one of the touching points, or maybe the points that frustrates people about this conversation who are outside of MLT, what I see happening is someone says, like we're saying, you gotta move your body and kind of do the oral, do it by ear first. I mean, that's just going to be more efficient and lead to a kind of a deeper, more proper, if we want to use that term, type of rhythmic learning. I think a lot of teachers or musicians that hear us start the conversation like that immediately think that we're against music theory, we're against music notation. It's all got to be by ear. You all just got to, feel it out. And I think this is actually part of the problem with the conversation, because I am not against learning, how to read notation, how to properly read, hopefully notationally audiate, or theoretically at a higher level, understand the mathematical relationships of these things. I think to say that that stuff has no purpose, I'm not very comfortable with that. But sometimes I think people outside of MLT, they almost write this off as thinking we're only talking about the body and the ear, and we're actively against that other stuff. And I don't know how we can communicate this with the public. Is that I mean, I'm trying to take the position it's all good, but it's a matter of like when are they ready for it, you know? And the answer is probably not right now, but maybe some kids are, just like Ron said. Maybe someone shows up and the metronome's cool for them, or a certain way of presenting things, or maybe some kids have such a solid grasp of rhythm, you could teach them to read something near instantly and it's all good. They're not going to have a problem with it. And I think that's the nuance that I knew Gordon understood this, but the nuance really is that it's just when is someone ready for something, right? But I don't know how we talk to other, non MLT teachers about this more skillfully, because I think it's very easy for this conversation to be put in the box of, well, this person's against theory or against reading, and in my life, it's really useful for me to be
But
able to read the Stravinsky score,
but
so they're obviously idiots. I mean, I get the emails. I've gotten emails that are
counting
like,
ca-
they're not death threats,
counting
but they're
can be
not far
done
off.
without the feel of meter, and it can be done with the feel of meter, right? So you're counting, and
Yeah.
it's imprecise, but you might be trying to imitate or just randomly, not randomly, but respond purposefully to whatever the band director's telling you to play. No, I want you to play it this way, and you don't play it correctly. He says, well, let's count it. So now you're practicing the rhythm with the counting, um, but you're just practicing the rhythm, But the numbers, right, have to sort it out. But
Well,
I
it
think
comes
it's
down to who's
clutter. I
listening
think
to what.
it becomes
It,
clutter
yeah,
if
yeah.
you don't audiate.
Well, because I was the kid in band where when the teacher was like, okay, we don't have this, let's count it. And then he would play it on the trumpet and then count it. And I would
Yeah,
just copy the actual sound he was making. I wasn't paying attention to the numbers. Uh, but not everyone's going to do that, right? A lot of people are going to pay a lot of attention to the numbers and not so much to, you know, what's going on with the numbers in terms of where are they arriving in time and what's going on. Like Ron said with that, the hilarious character was smoking a couple cigarettes at the same time in the drum lesson. I mean, Ron's just had the same thing. He's paying attention to what the guy's body is doing.
Rest his soul.
You and I had the same teacher, Ron.
Yeah,
I feel like there's
I
like
had Bill Grandy, William Grandy, and he had 2 cigarettes going at times too. Yeah.
Did he really? Yeah. Maybe it was a thing in that era. I'll tell you, I'll give you one more like rhythm story that young drummer I was so excited. We were going to do bolero and I was going to do that snare solo. Do you know what it's like for an ADHD kid like me to try to play for 14 minutes without my brain breaking or however long the piece is? Oh my gosh, in the rehearsals, I was all over the place. I just couldn't concentrate. I couldn't keep my focus. And Ed Barrow came to the rescue. He wrote it out for me in 3/4 in its original. Then he wrote it out in 3/8. Then he wrote it out in 2/4. Then he wrote it out. I'm actually looking at it right now. Then he wrote it out in an old 2/8 and 3/8 and 2/8 and 3/8 and 2/8 alternating. So even though the conductor was giving 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, I was going do da la day, do la da dee, do da la dee, do la da la dee la do da. And by shifting the meter that I was feeling, I got to play a game with myself where I was feeling the pulse, but I wasn't accenting on those meters, and I could get through the piece because I kept changing the underlying metric feel that I was feeling while still trying to keep that thing laser steady in a just a subtly growing crescendo. But you just keep that thing in 3/4 for at least little Ronnie Palanga, and my ADHD mind could just not stay with it for more than a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So I could send you this. I have this old music. I went and dug it up. Looking at a photograph of it right now, and it so picture it written in 3/8. Now, if I accented it incorrectly, you get dot digga dot digga dot 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 digga dot digga digga digga, which of course you wouldn't do. But if I'm feeling that after feeling the duple meter, I mean, I know it's written in 3, but it really does feel duple at that tempo, at least to me. Dee da 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 dee da da do do da 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 do right? Then I'm feeling za digga da digga da da digga da digga da, and my downbeats are now in three quavers apart, 3/8 notes apart, and it saved me because I'm looking I'm looking at notation that doesn't match what. Oh God, who wrote Bolero? Oh gosh, just forget a great French composer, Bolero.
Yeah, it was a I know we all remember, but we're old
How
now.
are we forgetting who wrote Bolero?
We're all
Okay,
old.
great.
Beau's not
The
coming
Bolero.
up with it.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was a trick for me in a way on a very obviously simple rhythm. Ravel, thank you.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll send it out to any teacher that ever wants to mess around with, trying to shift meter while the durations themselves remain identical. It's really quite an interesting thing to do to yourself.
The odd time signature fascinated student that I've been mentioning a few times in this lesson. That's what we've been exploring with some of these pieces, because there is some kind of subjectivity to the piece, and the band doesn't even seem to be able to answer the question what one time signature some of this in. So we've explored and I explored this in high school as well, but feeling, and Ron, we even talked about this on the podcast, feeling if you have a 7/8 pattern, you could have that going but drop into 7/4 or even 7/2 and let the pattern cycle. And that does seem to be, there's some harmonic equivalence of this. Basically, there's a game in changing the context. And I feel like it's actually, there's a little nugget of wisdom in terms of how to practice, not just how to entertain yourself so that you don't get kicked out of the performance. But there's a really, and obviously you know this, but there's a huge aspect of playing with context is part of what good practice is. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of musicians that can entertain themselves for hours in the practice room, that's the stuff they're doing. They're like, hey, do you notice this chord voicing? It could have this as a root, and then the progression sounds like this, or the same voicing could have this other note as the root, and it like something different. So there's some kind of harmonic context that just shifted under this chord, and it's fun to explore that. And I mean, I think looking back at a lot of the good practice that I mean, I've done a lot of bad practice over the past 25 years, but I've done a lot of good practice, and I would say some of the better practice is that exploring the shifting of context, just like Ron mentioned.
Yeah.
It's pretty
I got this like
wonderful.
big dopey grin on my face while you're talking about that because Gordon didn't use exclamation points very often in his writing. He just wasn't that kind of dude. And somewhere in that first book I ever read of his, Rhythm: Contrasting the Implications of Audiation and Notation, I remember later on where it's talking about uh, things like multi-temporal, multimetric music, and him writing "subjectivity abounds!" exclamation point. And you could just like hear this wonderful like little nerd moment of his own excitedness because he was quite sophisticated rhythmically too, coming through like there now we're getting to something exciting.
That was
Subjectivity
great.
abounds! Exclamation point.
A cute note about the
Oh
bolero
man.
is that was uh, uh, an assignment for uh, arranging. It was just an instrumental arrangement assignment. What do you call it?
Well, shit. I hope he passed.
Isn't that crazy? Just
That's a colorful piece, man.
Mm.
Hope he got a good grade.
I wonder. Boring snare part.
And I don't know, bring it back to even like Stravinsky, for example, when Beau was talking about Rite of Spring, evidently he didn't know how to notate that last bit, the sacrificial dance. He didn't know what
Mm.
kind of time signatures he was audiating himself, and it took himself quite some time to pin down how he wanted to notate that thing. And if you've ever played
Yeah.
timpani on it, like I have, oh good lord, you're not happy with the way he notated it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the first pieces that I really got intimately connected with, both through a lot of repeated listening as a symphonic piece, but
Hmm.
actually studying the score and breaking down. And I think at the time it was funny. I was mostly interested in the harmonic aspects of the score because my brain is
Jazz
very kind of
chords.
tunnel visioned on that. But I think I ended up leaving with a much bigger rhythmic
Yeah,
appreciation
yeah.
of what's going on. I think I've mentioned this before, but I've listened to the London Symphony version of it so much. There's a specific recording that was at the Vancouver Public Library that I essentially stole because I did not return it and I just paid them for it. But I forget who conducts it, but I've listened to it so much. It actually feels very difficult to listen to other versions of that piece because of the rhythms. Some
Wow.
of the dynamics and stuff, but the exact timing of this version I like so much. Some other ones are just they feel so wrong. I think I have
Yeah,
one
I
of
don't like that
Stravinsky
one.
conducting it that I don't like.
Oh yeah, you don't want to
Yeah,
listen to Stravinsky
He
conduct his
does,
own stuff. Oh
something's wrong
yeah.
there.
yeah. Because I remember I have this Stravinsky box set and I was like, oh yeah, this will really be the Rite of Spring. And then I listened to it and I was like,
Oh.
I think whoever was conducting the London Symphony, I think their interpretive perspective was a little more on point. Just kind
Yeah,
of wild if you think about it. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I would imagine if you're sitting in front of Stravinsky, does it are you the musician that suddenly becomes like rigid yourself and your rhythms come out all thing? I mean, he wasn't a clear conductor. He was not easy to follow if you watch his conducting on videos and things.
mm,
So I imagine that trying to keep the Rite of Spring together with an unsophisticated conductor that's audiating the thing at a level that doesn't then know what would benefit the players.
Yeah.
As
Yeah,
a
I think
really
so.
sophisticated conductor would obviously would know. Yeah.
That's a good point. What's going to benefit the players? Um, I see that sometimes I'm not happy with things being notated like 1716. That could
Yeah.
be, I think, better notated by designating the groups. Like, if it's 5, 5, 7, 5, or whatever, that's 17. No, that's way too much. But if it's like 5, 5, 7, that makes more sense to me to notate it like that than 17. It seems like it's doing nothing but potentially confusing performers to interpret it in a way that you didn't intend. Unless you're like Stravinsky and you're like, let's see how they interpret it. If you're not, you know.
Steve Harris, Dr. Steve Harris, who's recently, not that recently, but moderately recently retired as the head of percussion at Arizona, University of Arizona. He was at Florida State doing his doctorate when I was there, and we were playing a piece by Joe Schwantner that was notated in all sorts of good, fun, 1716y kind of things, and called "And the Mountains Rising Nowhere." And he renotated so much of that piece without telling Schwantner, and Schwantner was there in the audience when we played it. And so we were reading a score that did not match what the man had originally written. And the composer
Mm,
later on said, "Okay, I get it. I get it." Because I heard my piece played quite beautifully and had no idea. And I kind of look at it the same sort of the subjectivity of rhythm. You can place the downbeats where they're not, like I did with Stravinsky
mm,
Firebird as a kid, and you can float through meters that you're subjectively audiating contextually that aren't really what somebody's conducting, like I did with Bolero.
exactly.
So now composer, Pulitzer Prize winning composer Schwantner is sitting in the audience listening to the Florida State University wind ensemble play his piece, and play the heck out of it. But we were looking at notation that Steve Harris had done, that sort of just made reading the piece more clear, and
Yeah.
it wasn't like we were
I'm
suddenly
I'm
accenting things differently or anything like that. So
mhm.
I would wonder if we could renotate Sacrificial Dance and play it for Stravinsky without him knowing
Oh,
that he was listening
yeah.
Yeah.
to something that
It's subjective how you notate
just
that
a thought.
stuff, really, ultimately, right?
Yeah.
It
I mean, isn't it
Yeah.
even right back to Beau's quarter notes and piano stuff? Isn't it subjective how? I mean, I
Mm.
grew up on quarter note being the beat, so to speak, at least in my early learning. And now you look and you go, wait, all those jazz charts that take the half note as the macro beat makes so much more sense.
I
It
can't read any of these
it
beginning 4/4 piano pieces. I read them all in cut time now.
yeah.
And yeah, it's hard for me to not teach folk tunes like that in cut time. Like when they're notated,
Yeah.
it just sounds better to phrase it like that.
Yep.
It just,
Yep.
yeah, there definitely is a harmonic equivalent to this. I was talking to a bunch of students I have who are learning like just basic jazz standards, and there'll often be 2-5-1s that shift back and forth between like 2-5-1 to C major, 2-5-1 to C minor, or sorry, A minor. So relative major, relative
Hmm.
minor. And I've actually been writing in on their chord charts. This is the resting tone here. It's here now. This is the resting tone you're supposed to have. We can talk about later you having a subjective. Is this 2-5-1 to C major? Like the two, like the of the 3 chord in A minor. Like no. You're the C is the resting tone, or that's do, and A or La is the resting tone, and that's it. And I think there are pieces that would be helped if performers had some kind of whiff. Like, is this what the composer was hearing as the tonic? Like, I don't know anymore.
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's funny. Yeah, same kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I things like that. Always viewed the development section of Mozart's stuff as Mozart floating above the tonality, and
Hmm.
I don't know how to describe it. He's looking down on yeah, in small in some small idea we've modulated from C to F sharp minor uh during this development section, and on the small scale there's you could say,
Right.
hey, at this moment we're briefly in G, and this moment we're in D, and but as a bigger picture I really do believe the great audiators, the truly great audiators, it all becomes this kind of meta mode. I know this is way outside of the world of rhythm, but and then you picture
Mm-hmm.
those drawings of what was it, Bird? Was it Bird? You know what I'm talking about? No, Giant Steps, and he's drawing his relationships between keys, and
Col-
I think his mind is floating above the whole thing.
Coltrane.
So that has been my experience with Giant Steps over the past couple of years. I can hear it in two ways now. Now
That's
I
so
can
cool.
hear it as just being in B or it changing in when it does all the 5/1s and 2/5/1s.
Right.
And it's a lot easier to hear in B. Because it doesn't feel
That
like you're leaving
that's
the
the middle.
central
That's
kind
the
of
middle
thrust.
of the three majors, right?
That's the first chord it starts on. So I just chose that as a starting point. But yeah, it's very interesting. I hear it's funny when I listen to like Mozart, who's my favorite composer. Like Bach is very close second, like as close as you can be. But there's something about Mozart's playfulness is what does it for me. But yeah, when he does these huge escapades into like the dominant key now that even lasts a long time, they still sound like the dominant. They don't sound like a key change. And I was talking to a student today about this who's having trouble when he hears like the 2/5 of 4. It just sounds like he changed keys. Doesn't
Mm.
sound like he's on the 4 chord.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating. I find that really fascinating. How you have this Cam Taylor, who's I know he's a listener of this podcast. He's a great audiator and piano player as well. He coined this term. I believe he coined it, but he uses it at the least. He calls it a nested tonality or a nested
Mm.
kind of harmony. And I really like the term nested
Yeah.
because it gives this concept that there's a sub function going on.
Yeah.
So we're not only on the 4 chord, but there's a specific flavor of 4 chord where we're kind of hinting at other things, but we haven't lost track of the bigger context. And I love that term, nested harmony. That's what he called it. So it's been something that's been bouncing around my ears for a couple of years, but very cool stuff. It's very cool how a lot of these things have parallels between rhythm and harmony, even though they're so different in some sense. There's often an analogous concept because the human mind is doing similar structural like processing of these things, just in very different, with very different pieces of information.
So
Yeah.
Go rap the bolero, simple bolero rhythm while putting it into a nest of 3/8. So bop digga da
Yeah,
bop.
yeah, yeah.
So bop digga da bop is one bar. Bop digga da bop da bop bop, and feel that, and then try to not accidentally accent it differently and everything. And yeah, I see that as a really perfect parallel. That
Mm,
you're playing like contextual shifts that are depends on what level you set the zoom lens at. Uh,
mhm.
you know, cool stuff. Yeah, I love that
so
nested harmony. I completely agree
we
with that phrase.
that's
I
right.
want to say one more thing quick. Cam brought something interesting to my attention because at the time he brought it out, I thought it was really like classical music and jazz that really had a monopoly on this nested harmony thing. But Cam has pointed out there's Turkish classical music does the exact same thing, where they'll be they'll be playing in a certain tonality, and then they're hinting at another tonality off the dominant, but you're not supposed to be audiating that as an actual key change. You're supposed to be hearing the the anchored tonality underneath it. And so, yeah, it's interesting that it's not just a product of Western music or Western. Jazz is definitely influenced harmonically from European harmony heavily, but it's not just coming from that line, that lineage. It's in other forms of music. This nested
We
thing.
got
And
we got to throw in
all
the
right,
Bulgarian wedding music. Ivo Papasov and his Bulgarian wedding band.
yeah,
That I still can't
yeah,
get
yeah.
any chance of of feeling that properly yet. Although I saw them live, except they had a different clarinet player. Didn't matter because this guy was just freaking brilliant. The whole band is sick, and the whole audience got
Yeah.
up. All these Bulgarians and they started dancing fluidly to this stuff. And the kids were as young as three
Mm.
or four. And they're holding hands with a 92-year-old, and it's just a whole auditorium
Wow.
of people doing a folk dance to the most insane rhythms I've ever heard. And it's so graceful. And I'm trying to go, what? I'm just sitting there trying to count again, I guess. And anyway, it's really great stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we gotta put a little playlist of the tunes we've talked about today and put it in the show notes, maybe. Have we convinced anybody? Is somebody gonna call in or write in and say we?
To me, what the knockdown argument for me is, in a way, get outside of so much traditional Western music and everything. Go listen to a wonderful African rhythmic complex from somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, and you've got the kind of a go-go bell playing one rhythm, and you've
Yep.
got the drums playing another, and you listen to those lines, and they all hint at their own meter. And I remember an ethnomusicologist saying to me, and again, I don't, you don't know if he's right about it. He said, but his view was that it was the musical version for them of a kind of Necker cube when he watched them dance and move to it, and he would film and try to see when did they shift their own body, and oh wait, now they're suddenly dancing to what would be the pulse of the drum, but now they've shifted to what the agogo bell is doing as a central pulse, and the whole thing is sort of rotating around. Nobody's got the official
There is
downbeat.
not. You can talk to them all day long, and they'll never agree or say what they're talking about. They don't have it codified.
And
they don't do
point
anything
again,
about it. They just do it. And
exactly.
you
Point,
can't.
point being, yeah. Point being, there's no notation. There's nothing being counted, and watch them move.
They don't have to count it, but by the time they're 3 or 4 years old, they're more sophisticated rhythmically in these cultures than many of our conservatory students are. And
it's all internalization of movement.
That drives me nuts. It's like
I just
you got to look at the bigger picture than just your band.
Yeah. Well, and I think the problem we've been talking about and dancing around is that I think the Western mind really views rhythm as a mathematical thing in its essence. A lot of people think of rhythm as things that happen in time and space, and we can graph that on a grid. And that seems to be the perspective of what a lot of people think rhythm even is. And so when someone enters the conversation with that as this is what rhythm is, it's things happening across time, and we can graph it like this and count it. Counting seems like a necessary part of that, but that is a very Western perspective. It's a very math driven perspective to begin with. And a lot of these, I think that's such a, Ron, did you use the term smoking gun? The smoking gun for me, and this is the example I used in the rhythm video, there was this crazy drummer that played in our jazz band briefly in high school, and he could not count and he could not read, but he could play anything. Like his time was just absolutely unreal. And I don't know if he could play, bolero with all these shifting meters, but at that point when I was in grade 11 or grade 12, I was like, this is one of the best drummers I've ever seen in my life. And I've been to some good concerts with good bands. And that had a big impact on me. I recognized something in that situation, I'd always played by ear, so I was very turned on to the idea of playing by ear, but that was more of a private thing. I wasn't involved with a group of teachers or anyone who encouraged doing things by ear or without notation. But just seeing this drummer, my mind just took a note of that. Well, there's this guy that can do anything on the instrument better than I've seen anyone else do it, and he's not counting. I know he couldn't count things very well because our band teacher tried to get him to from time to time, and he also couldn't read very well. And so it just stands out as an example of just logically speaking, if rhythm was dependent on counting to develop and to be able to perform, he would have had to develop the ability to count to be able to do that, but he didn't. So what was actually going on? And you can always use the savant argument. You can just say, well, that was just some savant and everyone else has to do it. But I don't think that's very wise to just dismiss it like that. I mean, there's no perfect pitch equivalent of rhythm, right? Not in the same way. I mean, but even with perfect pitch, doesn't mean you're going to compose anything that sounds good. You just can blindly tell what notes are, and that could have some use when you're transcribing, Wayne Shorter harmony. You can kind of just cut into what the chords are. but it doesn't solve all your audiation problems by any means. But it's a fascinating topic, and the hate mail continues into my YouTube inbox, and so it's fun.
I think you'll continue to get the hate mail until people realize that movement yields rhythm, and most people just assume the reverse is true, that we move because we're rhythmic, and it's like, no, you became rhythmic because you moved. You just don't recall it anymore.
And if you got the space and the time all perfectly, then that just eliminates all possibility of anything that reaches the affect. It's like the weight and the flow are more fundamental to musicianship than the space and the time. And you in the different feels there are in swing, you can't count swing out, or the bebop. And then go back to the 20s. Da 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 da. The swing feel is different everywhere it goes.
Those holes, the holes in the net again, the spaces, where all the joy is.
Yes.
I'll tell you one funny story. I was teaching this student piano. I taught him for 5 years, and I actually grew quite close with him. And I taught him to play the Cantina song, the do that do that do that. And he had pretty good rhythm when we started together. But I was explaining to him the whole thing we were talking about before, how this should be felt in cut time. That's how this proper swing beat is felt. It's not felt on every beat when you're phrasing this. If you just phrase it in cut time, magical things start to happen. And he went through this oral process. He would sit with me, watch me where I was moving my body. We'd play the thing on the piano. We just did it on the piano. We didn't even do the actual oral part of it, really. It was mostly just on the piano. And he worked on that rhythm over a course of several months. And this kid has just impeccable bebop phrasing from learning that task, from just getting the Cantina song down. It like the first 4 bars of it. And what was really funny is after this rhythm video came out, he commented on the video. He said some nice things about me as a teacher. He said, "Best teacher out there, never counted once in my whole 5 years of learning piano, and my rhythm went off the charts." And he's right. I never made him count anything. It's just a lot of copying, and teach showing him how to move his body, and it was very satisfying. And his rhythm is truly absurd. Like it's sometimes I hear people solo that are studying jazz in university or whatever, and this kid, when he was like 13, I mean, he could phrase bebop lines properly just from that one exercise. I taught him how to play some Charlie Parker lines after that, and he would phrase them all perfectly after that. He had the thing
of
in
meter.
his body.
You get meter in the body,
really.
and then you get meter in the syllables. And my 4 and 5-year-olds, I can play music that they've never heard before, and they'll say, that moves. And they don't say duple and triple, and they don't even say 2s and 3s. They say, I say, is it twinkle twinkle, or is it itsy bitsy spider? Itsy bitsy spider, or sometimes Jack in a box for a different tempo.
Which, if anyone is not appreciating what Eric's doing there, it's a pragmatic stroke of genius in the sense of he's making it really doable for the kids. And I think a lot of teachers should take note of that in general, just keeping things down to earth like that. Because having them label the song that it's attached to, I mean, I would imagine for the 2 or 3-year-old brain, that's going to seem a lot more sensical to them.
We didn't even get into this. With your teachers that would fight with you about, counting. When you got 5/8 going, right? So, are you going to count that? 1, 8, 5, 1, 5, 5, 1. I don't even know why you would. Why would you count it?
Okay, here's an idea. We go. I'm gonna take a lesson from someone, at a music store locally in town, and I'll record it. And I'll be like, "Yeah, I'm getting started out the guitar. Can you help me with my strumming patterns?" And I'll find someone that's a zealous counter, and I'll just count everything out of time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just watch this teacher implode over the course of like
I
3
had a
months.
lady that was teaching eighth notes and quarter notes in front of a fourth grade class. And this is ta, and this is t, and this is another t. So ta, t, t. Okay, will you say that? Ta, t. What's this one? T. Good. So ta, t, t. I just about peed myself.
Torturing teachers the Beau Talifer way. 1,
Not yet.
2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm counting. And of course, what would the teacher start to do? Probably what old Ed Barrow used to do next to me, start to physically move. And you just ask him right then again, right there, why are you doing that? Why are you moving like that? Like, oh, beats have to be something you feel. Oh, okay. Now we have a starting point of what to actually count.
Maybe that's what the second cigarette was for, is if you didn't get it right, use it.
There is a wild parallel to getting people to improvise over chord changes where people are doing the same thing, where they're trying to think, I got to hit this D minor chord, so I really should get the F note in there. And then over the G7, maybe like getting to the B would be nice. And it's the exact same problem with people trying to improvise over chord changes. It's done
without the context. You need
using
all you
a
need is
conceptual
the meter, and you can do all the counting you want if the kid feels the meter.
Oh my goodness!
But why? You're just cluttering up the machine. Now the syllables make sense, and we can get into rhythm learning sequence at some point. But
yeah, we didn't really talk about the learning sequence, but it is kind of insane how well it works.
Stuff.
I have a student that's working on a Montuno, and she's been in a Latin percussion ensemble, like the real deal, with a real good teacher, and they were trying to get her to count it and stuff. And super smart lady, she's actually a professor. I just drew out the rhythm learning sequence in Duple down to the component that she would actually need to do. And this is actually funny because that rhythm is notated in eighth notes, but I'm telling her to zoom out and feel the meter even slower. That feels more authentic to me. And I just said, here's your checklist. There's basically like 5 levels that you need to go through before you can audiate this rhythm. So there really isn't even a point for me to get you to try to copy the pattern yet, because your mind doesn't have the bigger context to sit under it. And she's been very happy. We've been plugging away for the last 6 weeks at getting her microbeats, getting her divisions, getting just fleshing all that out. And then in the last couple lessons, she's starting to get the pattern can actually come out properly now. And that's another thing that just locks it in for me, is just how you can actually predict someone's rhythmic development. And you might not know how long it's going to take for them to go through each phase or each part of the learning sequence, but you can kind of show someone, this is where you are, these are the patterns you can do, and you're going to find these other patterns difficult until you get some more fundamental skills on. And for a lot of people, I think it's eye-opening to be like, wow, there's actually a rhyme and a reason to this. It's not just me not being able to do this. There's actually a sequence that I have to go through here of skills I have to learn. And
I teach my kids chicken and froggy, chicken and froggy, chicken and froggy, chicken and froggy, don't you stop. So, but there's this other piece that we dance to that's not 3, 2, 5, 8, it's 2, 3. So I call that froggy chick, froggy chick, and froggy chick, and not chicken and froggy chick. So I'll say those syllables because it's just familiar. What we've already done, whatever we're using, familiar. And then if they're doing that well, then I will move on to the syllables. And these kids are 4, 5, do ba
Mm-hmm.
do be do.
Mm-hmm.
I perform it for them just to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
like do today's and the do to da da dees and all that stuff. And I perform along with when they're distinguishing meter. I perform the syllables just for them to hear them, so that they're getting an oral of verbal association.
Yeah, and for any teachers out there that are listening that are are maybe starting to go, maybe there is something to this whole
No,
movement preceding counting thing,
no.
or even the deciding to pick up on the Gordon Froseth syllables or Froseth. So forgive me, I
That's
don't
how
know how it's
everybody always
pronounced,
said it.
but
Process. James.
Mm-hmm.
so just today I was doing a bit of a row song procedure with my kids, and it was in 7. And so, as we were doing the patterns, at first I'm just giving them long, short, short. We were literally saying where the macro beats are, and they had to move with me, and I would tell them this pattern should be easy for you. Ba da ba 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 da ba ba, and they echo. Yeah. Now, this could be a little harder, and I'm just taking them through content
Mm-hmm.
learning sequence, and they recognize it. Ba ba
Mm-hmm.
da da ba ga da ba tick it up, 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 tick it up. A little harder. Okay, let's get a little tougher. Ba ba da
Mm-hmm.
ba da ba ba da ba da ba 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 da ba da ba ba da ba da. Let's get a little harder. Let's try. So, and now I'm into division elongation kind of patterns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and and then I wind it back, and I go back downwards to division patterns and back down to macrobeat and microbeats, and then
Mm-hmm.
they're off and running creating their own patterns while I'm kind of just comping a little 7/8 pattern today. And it's amazing what when you say, okay, this could be an impossible one, and you throw out a wild rhythm, and you watch for that one kid that's like just throwing her body around to keep that pulse so she can try to spit out the rhythms, and it's like, okay, that's got to get the brain churning like crazy
Yeah.
rhythmically, and it's a joy to watch. Plus the kids dig it.
Yeah.
So for an elementary school
Mm.
teacher, I mean, do this stuff.
The
And
kids,
man, their breath control gets so much better for singing, and it's really,
you
really,
get
really far reaching.
crazy rhythm achievement by first, second grade. Just crazy. Back and forth, 5/8,
Mm.
7/8
Yeah.
stuff all the time. Easily. Predictable.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Doobie
They
doo doo
can,
doobie
Yeah.
doo
Yeah.
as long
doobie
as
doo
you do it
doo
through movement.
doobie doo. I sure love spring. Yes, I sure love spring. Oh, I sure do. I sure do. I sure do love spring. There's the end. It's a great day to go and get some air outside where the flowers grow and birds sing tweety tweet and all the ravens call and fly up with their big wings, dancing and singing like doobie doo doo doobie doo doobie doo doo doobie doo. I sure love spring. Yes, and I sure love spring. Oh, I sure do. I sure do. I sure do love spring.
So fun.
That's I love that tune, and it's Phrygian,
Oh gosh,
and then
so
goes
fun.
the Aeolian, and then the blues. What else can you want? The kids love it.
No, I'd rather count 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, let's count backwards from one. From one. One.
Yeah, what did I say
One.
One,
earlier? Yeah, because
0,
4
-1.
preceded
Yeah,
3
there you
So what
go.
did I
I
say?
went backwards from four. 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, guys.
A lot of fun.
Peace.
Remember to go to teachmusictokids.com, where you can see Dr. Eric's Yes No Music game, his book on harmonic learning sequence, and courses on the same. Also, his Spotify music playlists are up there. Teachmusictokids.com, all spelled out.